You think you know what happened to Tony and Michael Spilotro? You seen that picture, Casino, right? Beautiful film, sure. Baseball bats swinging in some cornfield, two guys getting buried while they're still breathing, all dramatic with the dirt falling on their faces. Millions of people watched that scene. Millions of people think that's how it went down. They're all wrong. See, there's another version, a version that sat locked up in federal court documents for 21 years, a version where a guy who was actually standing in that room breathing the same air told a judge and jury exactly what happened. No bats, nobody buried alive, no cornfield. And I'm going to tell you something right now. This version, the one you ain't never heard, it's worse, much worse. The kind of worse that keeps you up at night thinking about what human beings are capable of doing to each other when they decide somebody's got to go. Now, here's where this thing gets interesting. And I mean really interesting. Those brothers, Tony and Michael, they knew something was off before they even stepped foot outside their house that afternoon. You understand what I'm telling you? They felt it in their bones. Michael's wife, she gets up on that witness stand years later and tells the court that her husband looked at her before he left and said, real calm like, that if he wasn't back by 9 o'clock, it was no good. Think about that for a second. The man's telling his own wife that he might not be coming home, and he's still walking out the door. His daughter, Michelle, she testified too. She told that courtroom that her father said he loved her at least 10 times before he left. 10 times. Not once, not twice, 10 times. Like he was trying to say it enough that she'd remember it forever. Then he takes off his jewelry, puts it in one of them plastic sandwich bags, and hands it to her, tells her to bring it to some graduation party they were supposed to be at later that evening. Both brothers, they empty out their pockets, they take off their watches, they remove every single thing that could tell somebody who they were if things went sideways. And Michael, he tucks a little .22 caliber handgun into his clothes, a small piece, nothing flashy, but enough to maybe, just maybe, shoot his way out if everything went to hell. They weren't stupid. They weren't walking into that meeting blind. They just couldn't say no. See, Michael had been told that this was finally it. After all them years working as an associate, doing the dirty work, proving himself over and over, he was finally getting made. Full membership in the Chicago outfit. The thing he'd been chasing his whole adult life was supposedly waiting for him in that basement. And Tony, they told him he was getting promoted to capo, a crew leader with his own territory, his own little kingdom. After years of heat, years of whispered conversations in back rooms about whether the Spilotro brothers had become too much of a problem, this meeting was supposed to smooth everything over. A peace offering, an olive branch, a fresh start. James Marcello, he picked them up and drove them to a house in Bensonville, nice quiet suburb, right near O'Hare Airport. Nothing suspicious, just another house on another street. He pulls into the attached garage and the door closes behind them. Click. That's when everything changes. They walk through the house, down the stairs, into the basement where this ceremony is supposed to happen. The making of a new soldier, the coronation of a new capo. There was no ceremony. There were 15 men waiting in that basement. 15 guys standing there in the dim light, and not one of them was holding a Bible or a ceremonial knife or whatever they use for them rituals. These men were there for one reason and one reason only. Now listen, the common version of this story, the one everybody likes to tell, it treats Michael like he was just Tony's kid brother who got caught up in something that wasn't really about him, like he was collateral damage, an afterthought. That's wrong. That's completely wrong. Michael Spilotro was deep in the life on his own terms. We're talking bookmaking, drug dealing, prostitution, robbery, extortion, the whole menu. He ran a restaurant in Chicago called Hoagie's, and he helped manage a jewelry store with Tony called the Gold Rush. He had his own federal indictments pending, his own legal problems stacking up. This wasn't some innocent bystander who happened to have the wrong last name. Tony's son, Vincent, he said publicly years later that Michael may have actually been the real target of the hit, and Tony was killed to stop him from seeking revenge. You think about the implications of that for a second. If that's true, the outfit wasn't reluctantly taking out Tony's brother as some kind of loose end. They were killing Tony as a precaution. An insurance policy, making sure there wouldn't be any retaliation. So how did two of the most feared guys in the entire Chicago outfit end up walking into their own execution like lambs to the slaughter? Tony Spilotro had been the outfit's man in Las Vegas since 1971. His job was straightforward, simple, beautiful in its simplicity. Sit on the casino skim and make sure nobody touched it. That's it. That's the whole job description. His childhood friend, Frank Rosenthal, was running 4 strip casinos for Chicago: the Stardust, the Fremont, the Hacienda, the Marina. 4 golden geese laying golden eggs every single day. The way the skim worked was almost comically simple. Casino employees who were loyal to the outfit would rig the slot machine count rooms, skimming cash before it ever hit the official books. The money never existed as far as the IRS was concerned. Couriers carried it back to Chicago in suitcases, sometimes on private planes, sometimes in the trunks of cars driving through the desert in the middle of the night. We're talking $1 million a month from slots alone, plus table game money on top of that. A river of cash flowing from the neon lights of Las Vegas straight to the bosses back home. Any rational person, any person with half a brain would have looked at that arrangement and thought to themselves, I will protect this with my life and never draw a single unnecessary eyeball to it. Keep quiet, stay invisible, let the money flow, and everybody's happy. Tony was supposed to protect that pipeline and stay invisible. Instead, he got bored. And that, my friend, is the part of this story that never gets enough attention. Tony Spilotro wasn't taken down by the FBI or a rival family or bad luck or some twist of fate. He was taken down by his own inability to sit still, when sitting still was literally the only thing anyone asked him to do. $1 million a month was flowing through his hands like water through a river, and all he had to do was watch it go by. Just stand there and make sure nobody stuck their hand in the stream. He couldn't do it. He just couldn't. Tony was 5'2" with a reputation that made men twice his size nervous. Little guy, sure, but the kind of little guy who'd rip your throat out and smile while doing it. He had earned that reputation back in the early 60s, before Vegas, when the bosses sent him to find 2 rogue burglars who had killed connected men in an outfit neighborhood. These guys had crossed the line, and somebody had to teach them what happens when you cross lines. When the first one, Billy McCarthy, wouldn't give up his partner, Tony put McCarthy's head in a carpenter's vise. You know, one of them metal things you use to hold wood in place while you're working on it. He put the guy's head in there and started turning the handle, squeezing tighter and tighter until McCarthy's eye popped right out of his skull. McCarthy talked after that. Of course he talked. Tony killed both of them anyway. He was made at 25 years old. For the next decade, the bosses trusted him because he had no limits. No lines he wouldn't cross, no methods he wouldn't use. The kind of guy you send when you want a message delivered in blood. And then Vegas happened. Instead of protecting the skim like he was supposed to, Tony started running his own burglary crew on the side. Called themselves the Hole in the Wall Gang. They drilled through walls and ceilings to break into homes and jewelry stores across Las Vegas. Every job made Tony money. Every job also put another file on an FBI agent's desk. Think about that for a second. Really think about it. The outfit is pulling $1 million a month out of 4 casinos, the greatest money-making operation in the history of organized crime, and Tony is risking that entire thing so he can steal jewelry from suburban homes, penny ante stuff, compared to what he was supposed to be protecting. It's like being handed the keys to Fort Knox and then going out at night to rob parking meters. The Metro Intelligence Unit built an entire surveillance operation around Tony's crew and planted an informant named Sal Romano directly inside the gang. Right there with them, watching everything, reporting everything. On the 4th of July, 1981, the FBI caught them mid-burglary at a gift shop. Years of patient work by the feds, one bust, and Chicago got the message loud and clear. Tony was not protecting the money, he was lighting a flare over it, drawing attention to the very thing he was supposed to keep hidden. Then Tony crossed a line that turned a business problem into something personal, real personal. The kind of personal that makes men forget about profit margins and start thinking about revenge. He started sleeping with Jerry McGee, Frank Rosenthal's wife, the same Frank Rosenthal who had been his friend since they were kids on the west side of Chicago. The same guy who once talked another mobster out of strangling Tony after he mouthed off to the wrong person. Rosenthal had literally saved Tony's life, stepped in when nobody else would have, and Tony repaid him by going after his wife. The FBI already had wiretaps on virtually everyone in the outfit's Vegas operation, and the affair ended up on tape. Every whispered phone call, every secret meeting, all of it recorded. It gave the government a crowbar to pry apart the one relationship that had kept the whole Las Vegas setup stable. The friendship between Tony and Frank was the glue holding everything together, and Tony had set it on fire. Jerry was found drugged in the lobby of a Los Angeles hotel in November of 1982. She died 3 days later. Valium, cocaine, and whiskey in her system. She was 46 years old. When Rosenthal was later asked how he felt about Tony's murder, he reportedly said he was glad he wasn't asked to be one of his pallbearers. That tells you everything you need to know about how that friendship ended. Tony's own lieutenant flipped next. Frank Collada had been with him since they were teenagers, running the streets together. When the FBI arrested Collada, they played him a wiretap recording of Chicago bosses saying Tony needed to clean his dirty laundry, which was outfit code for killing liabilities. People who knew too much, talked too much, had become too much of a problem. Collada heard his own name in that conversation, his own name on a list of people who needed to disappear. He didn't think twice about what to do next. He made a deal with the feds, confessed to over 300 crimes, including 4 murders, and disappeared into witness protection. He gave the FBI a complete map of Tony's entire operation. Every name, every job, every dollar that changed hands. Years of loyalty erased by one recording. You'd think somebody in Chicago would have pulled Tony out before the damage got this bad. Brought him home, sat him down, told him to cool off. Nobody did. And I think that's because the outfit never saw Tony as a person they needed to save. They saw him as a line item on a balance sheet that hadn't turned negative yet. The moment the cost of keeping him alive exceeded the cost of killing him, the math was done. Simple as that. Nothing personal, just business. By 1985, Tony had gotten the boss of the entire Chicago outfit sent to prison. Joey Aiuppa, the big man himself, was convicted on skimming charges tied to the same casinos Tony had been sent to guard. Aiuppa was in his late 70s when he went away to die behind bars. He blamed Tony for everything, every charge, every conviction, every year of his sentence. The guy who was supposed to keep Las Vegas invisible had turned himself into the most famous mobster in Nevada. His face was in the papers. His name was on the news. The feds were following him everywhere he went. If Tony had just done the job he was given, kept his head down, stayed quiet, he'd have died an old man surrounded by grandchildren. Instead, he ended up in that basement. The bosses voted. Both brothers had to go. The first plan was to kill Tony in Vegas. A hit team, including Nick Calabrese, flew out there with explosives and automatic weapons. They planned to blow up Tony's car or ambush him on the street. Something loud, something definitive. That plan fell apart. Too many FBI agents watching Tony's every move, too many variables, too much that could go wrong. So the outfit went with something quieter, something that required the brothers to come to them willingly. Walking right into the trap with their eyes wide open, a fake ceremony, a fake promotion, a real basement. And that's the part that sits with me more than anything else in this whole tragic story. They didn't just kill the Spilotro brothers. They used the one thing Michael wanted most in the world, that membership he'd been chasing for years, to get him into the room. They dangled his dream in front of him like bait on a hook, and he swallowed it whole. So here's what actually happened in that basement, according to the man who was there with blood on his hands. At the Operation Family Secrets trial, a pathologist walked through the autopsy, results in clinical detail. Neither brother's skin had been broken by a heavy object. No baseball bats, no pipes, no weapons at all. The injuries were consistent with punches, kicks, and stomping, human bodies against human bodies, flesh against flesh. Then Nicholas Calabrese took the stand and named the men in the room: James LaPetra, John Fecarata, John DeFranzo, Sam Carlisi, Louis Aboli, James Marcello, Louis Marino, Joseph Ferriola, Ernest and Felice. 15 men total standing in that basement, waiting for two. Calabrese described walking up to Michael, casual as anything, and saying, "How you doing, Mike?" Like it was any other day. Then he grabbed Michael's legs while Aboli wrapped a rope around Michael's neck and strangled him. Just like that. 1 second you're saying hello, the next second you're killing a man. He described hearing Tony's voice somewhere behind him, asking to pray, just wanting a moment to make peace with God before the end, and then hearing nothing else because the beating had already started all around him. Fists and feet and bodies in motion. Michael never got to his 22. Never even had a chance to reach for it. All that preparation, all that awareness that something bad was coming, and it didn't matter. The trap was too perfect. And this is the part that stays with you. The part you can't shake off, no matter how hard you try. 15 men in a room and not one of them reached for a weapon. They used their hands. Fists, knees, feet, a rope. That's not an execution. That's personal. That's rage. Every man in that room chose to keep hitting, chose to feel bone crack under their knuckles, chose to be part of it in the most intimate way possible. And there's an irony to it that I don't think is accidental. Tony Spilotro built his entire reputation on what he did to Billy McCarthy with that vice. Hands-on, close range, no distance between him and the violence. He wanted to feel it, to be part of it, to look into a man's eyes while he destroyed him. The outfit killed him the same way. The man who made his name through brutality got exactly that in return. Whatever you put out into the world, it comes back to you eventually. If you've made it this far into the story, do me a favor and hit subscribe. I cover organized crime cases every week, pulling from trial transcripts and federal case files that the movies skip right over. The real stories, the ones they don't want you to know. After both brothers were dead, the men stripped them down to their underwear to remove any trace evidence from the clothing. Fibers, hairs, anything that could connect them to that basement. They drove the bodies roughly 100 miles southeast to a cornfield near Enos, Indiana, buried them one on top of the other in a single shallow grave underneath freshly planted corn rows. Indiana, not Illinois. Different state means a different jurisdiction would have to pick up the case. Makes things complicated, slows everything down, creates confusion about who's in charge. One grave, not two, meant less disturbed earth for someone to notice from a distance. These men had done this before. They knew what they were doing. John Fecarata had handled part of the burial. The outfit later killed him for botching it anyway. The bodies turned up too fast, too easily, and Fecarata had been running his mouth to his wife and his girlfriend about outfit business. Pillow talk that could put people away for life. That made him a problem on top of a problem, and problems get solved one way in that world. 8 days after the murders, a farmer near the Willow Slough Preserve noticed freshly turned earth between his corn rows. Just a patch of dirt that didn't look right, that didn't match the rest of the field. He figured a poacher had buried a deer killed out of season, some hunter who didn't want to get caught breaking the law, and called it in to the authorities. When investigators started digging, they did not find a deer. They found two bodies stacked on top of each other, stripped down to their undershorts, about 5 feet down in the Indiana soil. The farmer reportedly said that this does not look like any animal skin I have ever seen. No, it did not. The bodies went to Indianapolis for autopsy. They were too damaged to identify visually, faces beaten beyond recognition. Patrick, the Spilotro brother who had become a dentist instead of a gangster, the one who chose a different path, he provided the dental x-rays that confirmed it was Tony and Michael. 5 of the 6 Spilotro brothers went into organized crime. The 6th identified their bodies. Think about that family dynamic for a second. Think about Patrick sitting in his dental practice somewhere, living a normal life, and then getting the call that he needs to look at x-rays to confirm his brothers are dead. The Chicago Archdiocese refused to give them a Catholic funeral. The church wanted nothing to do with burying 2 men who had lived and died the way they did. A private service was held at Salerno's Galewood on North Harlem Avenue instead. About 300 people showed up to pay their respects. Among them, according to court records, were 3 of the men who had beaten them to death just days earlier. They stood with the mourners, looking somber and respectful. They looked at the bronze coffins, said the right things, shook the right hands. They said nothing about what they had done. Nothing about the basement, nothing about the sounds, nothing about the bodies they had stripped and buried. That silence held for almost 20 years, and money kept it in place. When Operation Family Secrets finally produced an indictment in 2005, 14 outfit members were charged in connection with 18 murders spanning decades of violence. The way the case came together is almost hard to believe, like something out of a movie that nobody would actually write because it seems too convenient. Frank Calabrese Jr., the son of outfit enforcer Frank Calabrese Sr., had secretly cooperated with the FBI while both men were in federal prison. Jr. wore a wire. He recorded his own father, taping him in a prison visiting room while pretending everything was normal. His own flesh and blood. That is how deep Operation Family Secrets went. Father and son sitting across from each other in a visiting room, one of them wearing a wire for the federal government. Nicholas Calabrese, Frank Sr.'s brother, and the hitman who had grabbed Michael's legs in that basement, became the first made member of the outfit to ever flip for the government. The first one to break the code of silence that had protected the organization for generations. But even after he started cooperating, even after he agreed to tell the truth, he lied about one thing. He protected James Marcello, the man who drove the brothers to Bensonville that day. Marcello had been paying Calabrese's wife $4,000 every month while Calabrese was sitting in prison. Regular as clockwork, that money showed up. That was not generosity. That was not friendship. That was a payroll. The outfit understood something about loyalty that does not show up in the movies. You do not buy silence with a one-time payment, no matter how big. You buy it with a check that shows up every single month, because the day it stops showing up, so does the silence. It's an ongoing relationship, a constant reminder of what's expected and what happens if expectations aren't met. That $4,000 kept Marcello's name out of Calabrese's testimony for years, even as Calabrese was giving up everything else. Every other name, every other crime, but not Marcello. That monthly payment bought a lot of loyalty. Prosecutors finally broke him with DNA evidence from a separate murder. A bloody glove left at the scene of John Fecurata's killing tied back to Calabrese. Physical evidence that couldn't be explained away, couldn't be denied. Once they had that evidence in their hands, the $4,000 insurance policy stopped working. Marcello was convicted and sentenced to life in February of 2009. He's still sitting in a federal supermax in Colorado, staring at walls, never getting out. Joey, the clown, Lombardo got life too, but died behind bars. Calabrese got 12 years for his cooperation, 14 murders. 12 years, do the math on that one. He died in March of 2023 at 80 years old, a free man. Died in his own bed, not in a basement, not in a cornfield. Sometimes the system works in strange ways. After Tony Spilotro was gone, nobody replaced him. Nobody stepped into that role in Las Vegas. The skim was over. The casino era that had made the outfit rich for 15 years just stopped, like somebody turned off a faucet. And the Chicago mob never got Las Vegas back, never recovered what they lost. The golden age was finished. The trial testimony changes the story, not because it's more violent than the movie, because it's more human. Two men who emptied their pockets that afternoon, took off their watches, said goodbye to their families, and drove to a meeting they already suspected was a trap because refusing was not an option. Walking into death because saying no meant something worse. And a daughter who had to sit in a federal courtroom years later and tell a jury full of strangers that her father said he loved her 10 times before he walked out the door that last time. He knew exactly what was waiting for him, and he went anyway. What kind of world produces moments like that? Casino changed the weapons, the location, and the fact that those two men walked in willingly with full knowledge of what might happen. But what Hollywood does to the endings, the way they reshape the truth to fit a narrative, that's a whole other conversation. A conversation about what we choose to remember and what we choose to forget. I've got more of those coming. Stick around.